All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of Hoops with Noel. Today, got a new little segment coming up with the Pacers and Heat. And basically, it's called Under the Lens. So, we're going to look at a team, maybe a couple teams, and see, are they contenders? Are they frauds? Just talk about their season so far, where they are in the standings, and all that stuff. So today's episode, we have a few more things than that. So we're going to talk about Harden's first game as a net. He played pretty well. They looked like, the powerhouse that they are on paper. Next, we're going to talk about a little speculation around the whole Kyrie thing. We'll get into that later, though, so we can start with the Nets' first game having Harden. What did you think, Noel?
I was impressed. I knew Harden would obviously make an impact right after being traded and getting there. I did not expect a triple-double off the bat.
Yeah.
I was particularly impressed with his passing. He had a couple flashy passes, and Kyrie Irving wasn't there, but Harden seemed to be running the point pretty well in his plays, which was definitely interesting to me to watch. And then that offense is basically unguardable. The question with the team is going to be around the defense, but especially if DeAndre Jordan is not on the floor and they run 5 wide sets when every guy can shoot the three, they can't be guarded. I mean, if they're hitting shots, if you try to double KD or Harden going to the hole, some guy's got an open three. It is a near impossible team to guard. I was very impressed by Harden in his debut. But what did you see? What were your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, I'm with you. And my thing was, so I've been a pretty big Harden fan. He's a great passer, which honestly doesn't get talked about enough due to his scoring, which is, he might be the best ISO scorer. And if he's not, KD and Kyrie are up there, and now they're all on the same team, which is kind of unfathomable to think of. But yeah, no, he looked great. Just like his chemistry already with the team was solid. And you wouldn't expect that coming out right, but with Harden's play style, it's kind of like if just someone going to a park and whatever team he's on, he's gonna fit in well and play well. So that was exciting to see. And yeah, I think as others have said, this team's already a juggernaut. We saw them even before they got Harden, and they blew out a couple teams. They had a little rough patch, but they looked really, really solid. My thing, though, is I'm interested to see how they fit Kyrie into this equation. There's only one ball, and they have 3 ISO scores. How do you think they're going to manage to do that?
So I think obviously they have the 3 ISO players, and they can have some sort of meshing. But I think what Steve Nash, as the coach, is going to have to figure out is how they should be subbed in and out with each other.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they're obviously going to have one of their big 3 on it at each time. And I think especially based on his role in Houston, Harden might have to maybe change his game a little bit when Kyrie gets back, in the sense that Kyrie is a more of a point guard. Although Harden can play the point guard very well, I think Kyrie is going to be the point guard for this team. So it's going to be interesting to see how Steve Nash works with changing the roles maybe of Harden. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think KD has proven in his time with the Warriors and even now that he doesn't really mind not having the ball, and he can change his role to fit whatever. But I am very curious to see how they move in Kyrie when he gets back. And I'm also curious your thoughts. What do you think they should do when Kyrie gets back?
Yeah, so I think from the experiment on the Warriors, we can obviously tell KD can play off ball. That's really not an issue. He's a sniper. He's still dropping 30 a night at will, when he wants or needs to. That's not an issue. Harden can play off ball too. He's obviously an insane shooter. Kyrie's a pretty good shooter too, but these guys function best when they have the ball. I full-heartedly expect that they'll figure it out and get a good system. And maybe if that means Kyrie is the guy who stays on with the bench unit in the first quarter so he can get his own. Because obviously, as long as they have one of those dudes out there, they're going to have a good source of offense than just them. Assuming all of them are not just completely off the mark, right? But yeah, the bench unit coming in is going to be interesting to see how they do score, because ISO is a way of scoring, but you can't do that every single time. And I think we saw that with the Clippers last year. You do need some like involvement with the players. I think they will figure it out though. That they have good pieces where the guys on the bench don't need the ball in their hands, like the Jeff Greens, the Shamit's, like Joe Harris too. I know he starts, but still, like they have the guys that they don't need the ball. They can just catch it in the corner and fire. So, yeah.
I have a question for you though on the Harden trade. Is I saw, and I don't know if anyone else out there saw these images, but the image of Harden in the Rockets warm up and the image of Harden in the Nets warm up.
Yeah.
Do you think there was something going on with maybe, I don't know, I've heard wearing a fat suit, something. He looks way bigger in the so I don't know. My takes. I'm curious what you think about that.
No, I think that's interesting. I think the main thing with that picture is it's a little deceiving due to the angle.
Mm-hmm.
Do I think he could have lost weight and probably was like not partying and just straight in the gym once he found out he's getting traded like imminently? Sure. Like I think there's definitely something going on there, but my thing is like you can take pictures from different angles and obviously like make them appear more of like what you want. And I know the picture you're talking about. And yeah, it is, I don't know, it's pretty crazy seeing the turnaround. But honestly, he can play. Like he played when he looked like he was maybe not in like playoff or game shape. And he still dropped 40 and 17 assists on the Trailblazers. So like he'll ball out regardless. It reminds me of stories I've seen of Shaq, because obviously like I didn't get to watch him like in his prime, but I would see things of like Kobe getting really mad at Shaq because he wasn't always like in shape coming into the season, but he would just play his way into it and it didn't matter because he was so dominant. So I think it's kind of similar to this situation. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a similar situation. I also think that one thing that is, I think, going to mesh the chemistry of the big three now in Brooklyn is that all of these players have had significant media biases against them, where the media just gone after all of these guys.
Yeah.
And I think Kyrie's probably been the most vocal about his hate for the media, but I think all of them probably have some hate for the media because at numerous times they have really dug into each of these players. And I think that that's going to fuel them to get in better shape and just help them as a chemistry with the team. Whereas I do remember there was when Katie was on the Warriors, there were some locker room problems with Draymond Green and Katie.
Yeah.
I don't see something like that happening on this Nets team. I really do think that they're going to mesh because they have a lot of similarities with the media bias, and that they're just Katie and Harden obviously have the old ties, and I think they're just going to mesh well. But what do you think about the chemistry? Do you think they're going to have problems? Do you think they're going to – what do you think?
Yeah, so I think like locker room specific is on the court and locker room, I think they definitely have a connection, but they're two separate things. So locker room, like just personalities, I think they're fine. Like Kyrie was the main advocate for getting KD there because they were friends, right? Harden has ties with KD, and I think Harden and Kyrie are probably good friends. My thing is on the court, like not having Kyrie there for the reasons we don't know, personal matters, whether it's social justice issues that he wants to work on or something COVID, or we just don't know, right? I think that's hurting them as of now because I think we've seen in the past, like with teams, you do need to have on the court chemistry no matter how many good players you have. And my thing is like the Clippers last year, I think they had more talent than those Nuggets teams. But then when they lost and you see all the locker room stuff and on the court, they don't synergize well, like that stuff matters. And so that leads me to my next point. Should the Nets trade Kyrie for a big and some other pieces? Now, this is mainly speculation due to there's not really any rumors of him getting traded, but it's something interesting to think of just due to the nature of the whole situation with Kyrie. And what I want to hear your thoughts because I think we might have different opinions on this.
Mm-hmm. So I can totally understand the point of trading Kyrie for a big and a dominant big because it makes total sense to the team because I think Harden proved in his debut that he can play the point guard. And if he can play the point guard, is Kyrie needed? That's the question that people might be asking. Although I do think it is very unrealistic in the sense that Kyrie was the master orchestrator. But it's definitely a fun topic to kind of think about and see who they get. So I'm curious your view, and if you think they should, who would you think that they maybe should target?
Yeah. So my thing right now is if you have KD and Harden, you really don't need much more offense than that. I think we've seen in the league like 2 stars is enough offense. And especially when you bring in, the Slim Reaper KD, who one of the most unguardable people, probably a top five, not probably, he is a top 5 player. And Harden, who I think is probably top 5, more close to the 4 or 5, however you rank him. Also an insane scorer. I think these guys can manufacture enough offense. And the thing with their team right now is they're kind of missing that big or the pieces on the bench that are bigger, like the center and power forward specifically. And yeah, they'll probably get some ring chasers or guys that are cheap that come in to fill those roles and kind of help aid. But my thing is like they would be such a better team if they didn't have to deal with all this Kyrie nonsense and they just had a big that could, protect the paint, that could get all the boards when Harden misses his threes and he's off. I just think they'd be a better team. And the part that I'm struggling with is like, who would they get? Because you think of the best bigs, like obviously Jokic and Embiid are not realistic. Like that's not happening. Karl Anthony Towns, like would the Timberwolves move off of him for Kyrie? Probably not. Like Porzingis, Miles Turner, I can't see him going either there. So that's my thing right now is I just can't see a team where he would go. Maybe I can't think of one. That's my issue right now with the trade. But in theory, like I think they should do it if they could find a trade partners. Like honestly, just the biggest hurdle, and it just kind of sends a bad message to the team sometimes. Like as much of a business as it is, like the players really do care about relationships and all that. So I don't think it'll happen, but I think if they had the team, they should do it.
Mm-hmm. What I would say is, yeah, they would probably have to take a stretch or a risk on a maybe a younger center, or if they did it, which could be a little bit risky. I don't know if they'd actually do it. But one guy I think, and I don't know what the trade value would look like, but if they could trade some pieces, I think PJ Tucker, who has already played with Harden, would match very well on this team in the sense that I think this team, their defense is going to be the question with this team, but I think they have the potential to really have the actual blueprint of the Rockets small ball way of the D'Antoni game that they had, and a lot of people discredited that game plan from the get-go, but it did that Rockets team was pretty legit, and they definitely made some noise with that. And PJ Tucker was a big part of that because although he's not very tall, he can guard the biggest of bigs. He can shoot the three decently well in the corner, and he is scrappy. He is a type of guy who goes all out on defense. And the one thing that I think will be called into question with this Nets team is with the big three on offense, how much energy are they going to have to put in on offense? And how is that going to relate to how much they can put in on defense? Because I really think this Nets team is going to come down to maybe less Kyrie, but how well Harden and KD can play defense and play two-way players and be two-way players.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've seen KD play good defense, right? We've seen Harden play good defense as of more recently. But yeah, Kyrie's not the best defender. Joe Harris isn't the best defender. DeAndre Jordan gets, switched out onto a point guard. He's kind of getting left in the dust there. And they don't really have a big man off the bench that can come in and, provide that defensive plug. My thing with that is, Kyrie's obviously like a lot more valuable than PJ Tucker would be in a trade.
Yeah, when I say that, I wouldn't trade Kyrie. Maybe some picks for other players. I think maybe Dinwiddie. Like I think that was that.
Yeah, we did.
I love Dinwiddie though. I hope Dinwiddie stays in the Nets. He's my man. He's been my man.
Yeah,
but that could be a good trade piece. Just to play devil's advocate.
No, yeah, that's the thing, right? Because, like Dinwiddie is really good, but he's also kind of something they already have. If they have Kyrie, KD, and Harden, they don't really need another dude who can score. Like all three of those guys can. And as much as there's like preserving energy for defense and all that, like if they're switching turns, running different offensive sets, like they're gonna have energy. And obviously Dinwiddie can't play this year, and it would be you could argue short-sighted to trade him because he is a pretty valuable piece. But, if they traded him for like a big or something like that, like a pretty good big and maybe a bench piece or something, like that is something they could definitely explore because him on the team it's a little redundant with their top three players. So interesting to think about for the Nets. Will they make more moves? I think they'll definitely add some pieces, like some ring chasers and whatnot. I think that happens for every team because they have the makings of being, a championship contender. And there is one more angle we did want to touch on, and that's the 76ers angle. So I guess I could just like say what the report was. So basically it was the 76ers, the trade that they were going to make was going to be Ben Simmons and I believe 3 firsts. And they didn't want to throw in Tyrese Maxey, their rookie, and the Rockets really wanted them to throw in their rookie. And that was one of the reasons the trade fell through. So I'm interested to see, what are your thoughts on that report?
Yeah, so super interesting report. You were actually the first person to tell me about this report. I hadn't seen this, but I was very curious where Harden would end up, obviously, and it is kind of fun to think if he would have been on the Sixers. Obviously, Tyrese Maxey has shown some promise, but it seems like the Sixers might have just been worried because I think Embiid and Harden would have been an all-time duo. That would have been an awesome duo and one of the best in standstill offense. But it makes me think that the Sixers didn't have enough confidence, honestly, in that duo to take them to get a ship or to contend when they would lose Ben Simmons and Maxey and some first rounders. And I think my thoughts is I think it would probably have to do around the defensive side of the ball because I think Simmons, obviously, he's a hard guy to game plan on the offensive side of the ball, but he brings so much on defense. And I think that they might have been scared of what their defense would have turned into, especially guys with like Seth Curry on their team or Danny Green's still pretty good on defense, but he's getting a little bit older. I don't know how well he can do. That's my thoughts. What are your thoughts on that trade, Blake?
Yeah, I'm thinking they messed up big time. There's not many opportunities you get the chance to add a player of Harden's caliber, and especially when the other main team that's looking to get him is in your conference, right? Like you're gonna have to play this team that now has 3 just stars. So I really think they missed out there, and if we don't really know exactly if Tyrese Maxey was the difference or not. And yeah, he's shown promise, but like you're this close away from getting Harden, and Tyrese Maxey is what you're stuck on. Is I don't agree with it, and especially with the ties to Daryl Morey because he's in the 76ers front office. He's always been about analytics. They added a bunch of 3-point shooters, this offseason, which is what they need. And I really think this would have been the top team in the East, if not the top 3. And they're already that close. Yeah, my thing's just Ben Simmons. That team would have been like those first round picks really wouldn't have been all that valuable, right? So it comes down to mainly just Ben Simmons. So my thinking is they have a lot of trust in him, and they think he can develop a better shot, and they can win with him. I just don't agree with the logic there, but it is what it is.
No, I agree. I think that was a good sum up. But I think we've gotten a good amount in the Nets, the angles, and then I think one of the other teams that we're going to mention with under the lens view, some is the Hawks. I think is what we're going to.
Yeah.
I'm curious. You can start on this one. What are your thoughts on the Atlanta Hawks?
Yeah, so they got out to the really fast start, right? They were looking really good, looking like they could maybe be one of those top 6 seeds in the playoffs. And there's been some news with Trae Young and players wanting the coaching staff and front office to hold them accountable for lackluster shot selection, defense, and all that. And he didn't take it well at all. He was kind of pissed at that. And the last few games, they've kind of fallen off. They're under 500 now. He hasn't played his best. And it kind of, makes you think, like, whose side should they go on? Should they go on with their maybe developing star, or should they go on with the team and, like, hold him accountable? And I would say, like, go with the team on this one. You have to have accountability. I think we saw that with the Rockets. We've seen that with other teams. And as good as a superstar is, and I don't even think he is necessarily that yet, but he could be, you do need to hold them accountable. What are your thoughts on the matter?
I totally agree with you, and I think one thing that he really needs to own up is his defense is horrendous. I understand he's very small. That is just like it is hard for him to play defense with his size. But I watched the Hawks last game against the Blazers, and there were a lot of plays where he just wasn't putting all of his effort into the defensive end of the ball. And I can understand that he's going to put more energy on the offensive side of the ball. That's where he's more gifted and more talented. But if he goes like half speed or half energy on defense, and I'm some of his teammates, I'm gonna call him out. Like it's totally fair. I think one of the guys who did it was John Collins.
Yeah, he was the main person to do that.
Totally warranted. And honestly, I'm pretty down on Trae Young after watching some of these Hawks games. I think he has so much to offer on offense, but he also lets guys who aren't very good offensive players kind of bully him on defense.
Yeah.
Blow by him. They can post him up. The Blazers would send guys like Gary Trent Jr. was getting his own. I think Gary Trent Jr. would see Trae Young on him in that game and was just seeing barbecue chicken. Is all I gotta say. It was bad. Trae Young's defense is next. I think he's the worst defensive player in the league. He's still a very fun guy to watch on offense. This team is a very fun team to watch, but he should be more accountable, is the way I see it.
Yeah. And yeah, I think his main comparison has been Curry, right? And we know Curry was never the best defender, pretty decent off ball, but the Warriors, they would just basically just try do their best to hide him. And they had Draymond, they had Clay, KD for a bit, Iguodala. So they had dudes that were plus defenders and good at other stuff, and they could hide him pretty decently well. And then he'd make up for it on the offensive end, obviously being the best shooter ever. The thing with Trae Young is his shot selection is really just not all that great. And, he's kind of like the modern age, like shot chucker player where you see him at the park and he definitely is skillful, right? Like there's no denying that, but he just doesn't use that to benefit the team, takes poor shots, doesn't play defense, the type of guy you just really don't want to be on a team with. So yeah, I'm with you. Like John Collins, I mean, they should have called him out earlier, probably. But yeah, it's just such a bad look, and they're out of the playoff picture now. It's early in the year, they have obviously time to recover and get better, but they're 3-7 in their last 10. They've fallen to earth a little bit after that really hot start. And then I guess that begs the question, like, can a team win with Trae Young as the main player?
Yeah, my answer to that question is right now, current Trae Young, they can win, but against contenders, no. They're just not going to be a contender. But one thing I'm curious about is how they use Trae Young's minutes, because I think he obviously can have an offensive spark at any time, but their backup is Rondo this year, who is a veteran who can play pretty good defense too. So I'm very curious how they utilize him in the lineup. And if Trae Young's kind of bumming it up and not being good on both sides of the ball, I think they should get Rondo involved because they have scorers around Trae Young. They got Bogdanovich in free agency, Cam Reddish, DeAndre Hunter's coming into his own, John Collins, Capella. They got guys, if they get the ball, they can score, and they don't really need Trae Young essentially shot chucking. So I'm very curious how they utilize Rondo. What do you think Rondo could be a spark? What are your thoughts on that, Blake?
No, he's a pretty good playmaker, but if they want to have like an actual offense, I don't think he could be a guy that's that great of a distributor. And it's not, I love Rondo. I think he's awesome. I just think he's past the point where he can actually run an offense. I think they'll need Young. And yeah, to your point, so the guy's only 22. We may be hypercritical as of now due to just the success of other players, right? But yeah, the style they play is not really like good for winning games. And if that's what your future's looking like, it's going to be tough for them to actually like build around him because they're going to need a second and third piece. Is that on the roster now? Maybe someone could develop to be that. it doesn't look like they have anyone that's actually going to develop to be a number 2 option on a winning team. So maybe Trae Young will have to be that and like take the Kyrie route where he's not the best player, but he's the second best guy, and he's that offensive juggernaut that they need him to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree on that.
Yep. And so the next thing that we're going to move to is Under the Lens. So this was kind of like the highlight of our episode, and basically we just want to look at a couple teams that we've seen them in the standings, seen them play, and we're thinking, can they continue to do what they're doing, or will they improve, or will they get worse? And so the first team is going to be the Indiana Pacers. So I believe they're 8-5, and they are the 3rd or 4th seed in the East, depending on how games go. But they've gotten off to a fast start. They always make the playoffs. They made a move for LeVert, got rid of Oladipo. What are your thoughts on this team, Noel?
So this is one of my favorite teams in the NBA right now. I think they're going to struggle because LeVert had this little like mass in his kidney. He's going to be out for an extended period of time.
I hope he gets better from that.
Yeah, so that was a scary injury. I'm hoping for fast recovery on that. So they're going to struggle without him. But in the long term, I loved that trade. I think LeVert really is a guy who could be a superstar level of any team. I think he proved that in the bubble with that Nets team who didn't really have anything last year. And then also just the Sabonis-Turner duo, which you touched on in our other video of the duo for 25. They are a dynamic duo, to say the least. They impress me a lot. And then this team just has other pieces around who can stretch the floor. They have Malcolm Brogdon, who's been playing well. My man Dougie McBuckets, he's been playing. He's been shooting the ball well.
Lights out.
One thing I'm curious is, correct me if I'm wrong, they still have both Holidays besides Drew, the other two?
I believe so. And then they also have TJ Warren, who's been injured for the majority of the year.
Yeah, so they're a deep team. And my big thing that I'm curious to watch is if either of the other two Holidays can turn into Drew Holiday, because he is a stud defender. He's one of the best two-way players. And if they could, I mean, they're brothers, so they seem like they have the potential. If they can turn into like 2 more Drew Holidays to have 2 more two-way players, a lot of twos right there. This team could really be a contender. And one of my hot takes is if this team goes up and lives up to their potential and LeVert comes back up injury playing good, I like this team over the Boston Celtics. You heard it here first. So I'm pretty hot on this team. I think a lot of people aren't as hot as I am, but I'm curious your thoughts on them and their trade.
Yeah, so I don't think the Holidays will ever turn into Drew Holiday. So that's number 1. Number 2, that duo is definitely really solid. We did touch on that. Sabonis has been awesome. People kind of got on his case for like maybe he didn't deserve to be in the All-Star game, but I think he's proven all those guys wrong. Miles Turner's defense is ridiculous. My only thing with them is in the NBA now, to get far in the playoffs, you do need a star. And whether any of these guys on this team can be that bona fide top 10 star player is to be seen. Now, I do like the LeVert trade a lot. Oladipo's on the last year of his contract, didn't want to be there, hasn't really playing all that well since he got that huge injury. And LeVert has been young, playing really well in the bubble. He looked great with the opportunities he was given. And I think he's just like a perfect fit for this Pacers team, kind of a low-key guy. You don't see his name in the media a ton, but he does his job and he does it well. Same with Brogdon, same with McBuckets. My thing is like the star power is just not there yet. Whether LeVert can turn into that, maybe whether Sabonis can, that's what they're missing. And also, they don't really have a great wing like defenders, I would say. McBuckets isn't. TJ Warren's injured now, but we've seen what Jimmy Butler's done to him in the past. So that's my thing is like how do they match up against the KDs, the Giannis, the Tatum, and all those guys? And that's where I'm a little bearish on them compared to you. But I think they definitely are a team that could, get to the second round depending on who they draw. But yeah, they are an interesting squad for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with you. And obviously I'm on the hype and I think
Yeah.
I'm more with most people. But I think that when I say that they could make runs like this year, I think they can make an upset first round. But I think it's really about the future, and I think the main piece is going to be how LeVert develops.
Yeah.
And I think LeVert is a better player than Oladipo. I've just liked him more. I just think because he's a little bit more consistent, I would say. But they are very similar. So I am curious about this Pacers team. I'm pretty high on them, but I'm interested to watch them for the rest of the season and seeing how they all kind of mesh.
Yeah.
Definitely an interesting team.
Yeah, for sure. And then on the flip side, the team that bounced them out of the playoffs last time, they've been struggling this year, and that's the Miami Heat. So what are your thoughts on them? We know they made it to the championship last year, pretty uncanny fashion. What are your thoughts on them, and can they get back to the playoffs? It's still early in the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean they've had some struggles so far. I'm not too worried, honestly, about this team because I think the thing with this team is they love the underdog mentality. So
Yeah.
I think one, they're gonna make the playoffs, and even if they make it as a pretty high seed, like a 6, 7, or 8, like barely get in, I just think they'll almost even play to their strengths a little bit more because this team has just kind of collected on the fact that they were an underdog team. They really built around that. They got some good pieces like Avery Bradley this year. Maybe they're still kind of meshing, but I'm not too worried about this team. I think it'll still be in the mix in the playoffs, and we'll still be able to make some noise. But what about you?
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same. So Jimmy Butler's been injured for I think half the games. He's played pretty well when he's been in. Bam's still developing, pretty good player there. We touched on them in our first episode, and they have great depth, right? My thing with them is they are kind of some of their players like Butler and Dragic are older. Same with Iguodala. They're not one of those teams that's gonna go all out in the regular season to get the best seed like we've seen in past. As long as they make the playoffs, they're happy. They'll play their guys the minutes they need to when they get there. But yeah, I think they'll bounce back. I hope they do. They made a great run last year. Benefited from the bubble, I think, a little more than other teams just because they did have some young guys like Robinson and Hero who have never experienced being under that intense pressure that the bubble doesn't create. But I like them coming back. Do you think they need to make any moves, or do you think their roster is good as is?
I think it's pretty good as is, especially with the Avery Bradley move. I think if they were looking to make moves, if they started to if they wanted to commit to either Hero or Robinson, maybe looking to ship the other one, but I think they're a good duo together.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know too many moves that I would make as the Heat. Do you have any moves you think they should make?
No. Yeah, I'm kind of on the same boat with you. Their roster is what it is. It's Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo as their stars. Dragic's kind of that third guy that doesn't get talked about enough, although he's really good, and they missed him in the playoffs for sure, specifically the finals. But yeah, my thing is I don't know if I'm sold on the Hero-Robinson duo, or at least having both of them. Hero and Robinson both played really well in the playoffs, but I don't know. I'm just not the biggest Tyler Hero guy. I think he was getting a little too much love, especially the rumor that he was untouchable in the Harden trade deals. I just think that's utter nonsense. If you could trade Tyler Hero and some other stuff for Harden, you do that in a snap. No, don't even question it. That's my thing is I think the duo is a little overrated, mainly because of Hero, but I love me some Duncan Robinson. The man shoots 40% on 9, 10 threes a game, which is just – it's the modern NBA, and he fits it well. He's not the best on defense, but he more than makes up for it with his offense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would agree with your point to an extent that there has been a lot of hype, especially around Hero.
A little too much hype.
Yeah. There's a valid argument. There's a little bit too much hype because I think he's gotten very, very close to the media. And it seems like if the media just loves you, then you're just going to be propped on this little pedestal, almost like no one can take you down.
Yeah.
And I think, obviously Hero's shown a lot of promise, but if he doesn't show that much development, I think he definitely could plateau a little bit, especially if he can't improve on the defensive side of the ball. But I think this Heat team will be fine this year, and it's still a very fun team to watch because of how deep they are. And one guy I'm looking at just seeing how much potential he can live up to is Bam Adebayo, one of my favorite guys to watch. And I just think that he has a lot more he can show if he gets more of a jump shot. I just think he has a lot more to show on the offensive side of the ball, and I'm very curious to see how he develops over the year.
And I think this year his jump shot has gotten better, and he's already a monster on defense. We've seen that. Can somewhat help run the offense with his passing, and getting that jumper would be such a huge addition to his game, make them a ton harder to defend. And I'm with you on the hero thing. And rightfully so. He was getting a lot of credit. He was making clutch shots in the playoffs that you just don't see from rookies. But he is a role player. He's not going to be that star piece. Probably not the second best piece on a team. Probably not even the third. But he's still like a pretty good asset to any team. Interested, to see how his career plays out, especially like with him and Robinson, because they are very similar. But both those dudes on the court is dangerous because you get them open for a three, and it's not fun if you're a defense.
As Mike Breen would say, bang!
Yeah, exactly. Bang. Right. But that's going to conclude this episode of Hoops with Noel. So we'll definitely be back with some other under the lenses and just talking about specific teams. And then hopefully more ranking videos. We didn't do this one this time, but we're looking to do more, maybe talk about duos, power rankings, best passers, something like that. So we'll see. And thanks for watching.
I would also say before we end is if you guys want ranking videos, definitely leave them in the comments, and we'd be sure to do it.
Yeah, like I know one that came to my mind was like best passers, so that'd be interesting. But if you want to see like best dunkers or whatever ranking vids do, put those in the comments, and we'll try to get that out for you. Thank you again.